Few people have the courage to admit it. But life doesn't give us what we want. It gives us back what we tolerate. Carl Jung said, "What you silently accept, you allow to remain." And perhaps this is why so many lives surrounded by shallow people, small opportunities, and emptying loves. It's not the world that's cruel, it's the individual who still doesn't remember their own worth. Spirituality isn't about vibrating high, but about stopping vibrating low with what diminishes you. When you value yourself, the universe doesn't reward you, it just begins to mirror you more accurately. The problem is that the ego confuses humility with submission. It confuses empathy with self-abandonment. And that's how a person loses themselves, trying to be good, understanding, and available, while the unconscious sends clear signals that something is wrong. The body becomes ill, the mind becomes exhausted, and the heart feels a weariness that not even sleep can cure. Because there's an invisible price to not valuing yourself, the price of living your entire life asking for a discount on yourself. The persona smiles, but the soul screams, and it's in this abyss between what we show and what we feel that the most common pain of modernity arises, that of forgetting who you are, trying to be loved. But here's the paradox. When you finally stop begging for scraps, the whole world changes its stance. What seemed like rejection becomes selection. What seemed like loss reveals itself as liberation. And the same doors that once closed now only open to those who walk with their heads held high. True spirituality is brutally practical. It begins the moment you say, "Enough." When you understand that valuing yourself isn't selfishness, but emotional hygiene. That shadow work isn't about healing yourself, but about remembering that you never had to be less to fit in with anyone else. And it's from this point, from this awareness that tears yet liberates, that life begins to reorganize itself. Relationships change, conversations change, energy shifts. Because when inner value stabilizes, everything that isn't on the same wavelength simply collapses, and what remains is what truly has value. The journey begins here, when no becomes an act of love, and silence a form of respect. Because when you value yourself, the universe has no choice but to treat you the same way. There's a silent force that emanates from those who have learned to value themselves. It's not arrogance or pride, it's awareness. Carl Jung said that what we deny in ourselves returns through destiny. And when someone denies their own worth, the world treats them like a spare part. Valuing yourself is a form of spirituality in action, a subtle movement of returning to the self, which breaks the hypnosis of the ego and the persona. Those who value themselves understand that self-love isn't a feeling, it's a discipline. It's waking up and choosing daily not to sell yourself for emotional crumbs. This energy changes the surrounding field, alters the frequency of relationships, and creates a kind of invisible magnetic field, the same one that makes certain people enter a room and, without saying a word, command respect. The energy of someone who values themselves is different because it's rare. In a world where almost everyone seeks validation, self-worth is a revolutionary act. Most people build their self-esteem like someone building a house on sand, depending on others' praise, the number of likes, the response that doesn't come. But those who practice their own shadow work know that true value arises when the soul stops begging for recognition. It's the point at which the individual understands that the ego will always seek a stage, while the self seeks center stage. Valuing yourself, then, means stopping chasing applause and starting chasing silence. It's there, in seclusion, that human beings discover that their value doesn't need to be defended. It just needs to be lived. Interestingly, this energy is self-expansive. When a person values themselves, they become a mirror for those who don't yet recognize themselves. This is why often those who truly love themselves are disturbing. The light of authenticity reveals the shadows of others. Jung would call this an archetypal confrontation, when the simple act of existing coherently awakens discomfort in those who still live within the mask of their persona. Those who value themselves don't seek to convince anyone of anything, they simply are. And this presence in itself is pedagogical. It's like observing a steady flame amidst a chaotic wind. It's not about the fire being stronger, but about the fire knowing who it is. Valuing yourself is also a practical exercise, not just a philosophical one. It means learning to say no without guilt, ending draining conversations, and limiting emotional outbursts. It's recognizing that time is a spiritual asset, and those who waste energy on things that don't nourish them sicken their own psyche. Simple examples: not responding to messages that don't deserve a response, spending Sundays caring for your soul instead of seeking digital approval, investing in uplifting reading material like Jung's Man and His Symbols or Tolle's The Power of Now. Small everyday gestures are the unconscious's practical way of shouting, "I exist." Valuing yourself is letting the unconscious know it has been heard, but this energy isn't achieved overnight. It's an alchemical process, an internal purification where the ego tries to sabotage and the shadow tries to negotiate. There will be days when the individual will doubt their own worth. There will be relapses, a desire to please again, to don the persona again to be accepted. But it is at this point that true spirituality begins, when one realizes that life doesn't reward those who nullify themselves, but those who know themselves. And this recognition is the gateway to something greater, because when inner value stabilizes, the mirror of relationships begins to reflect differently. And it is precisely in this invisible mirror that the next step is drawn. No relationship is neutral. Every human interaction is, in some way, a mirror of the unconscious. Carl Jung said that what irritates us in others can lead us to understanding ourselves. And there is no more accurate phrase to understand what happens between two souls. Relationships are laboratories of self-knowledge, where the ego tries to maintain control while the self seeks revelation. When someone arouses anger, envy, admiration, or enchantment in us, they are in fact shining a spotlight on parts of ourselves we don't yet know. Spirituality begins when human beings stop blaming others and start asking themselves, what is this person showing me about myself? This is the silent beginning of shadow work. Most people, however, live unconsciously. They believe they relate to the other, when in reality they relate to their projections. The ego creates narratives, shapes expectations, and dresses up the persona to be accepted. And when something deviates from this script, it calls it disappointment. But what's truly disappointing is the unmasking of one's own illusions. Jung said, "We do not see things as they are, but as we are." Thus, when someone is betrayed, ignored, or devalued, the unconscious seizes the opportunity to reveal old wounds disguised as current dramas. Nothing that hurts is truly new. It's just childhood begging to be seen again, with adult eyes. This mirror of relationships has something cruel and, at the same time, profoundly liberating. Cruel, because it doesn't forgive lies. Liberating, because it offers a path to integration. It is through the other that we discover where we still bleed, and that is why some encounters seem destined. They wound us not to punish, but to reveal. A toxic relationship, for example, can be a reflection of the shadow seeking approval. A distant friend can mirror the persona, feigning indifference to avoid rejection. Everything that bothers us is a coded message from the unconscious saying, there is still something here that needs to be loved. This is the true spiritual meaning of the human encounter. When you understand this mirror, your way of relating changes. The other person ceases to be an enemy or a savior and becomes a teacher. Valuing yourself then isn't about isolating yourself, but learning to observe yourself in relationships. A practical example? Every time someone provokes an intense reaction, anger, jealousy, guilt, note the feeling before reacting. Then ask yourself, where does this come from? What memory, belief, or archetype was touched here? This practice transforms your life because it shifts the power of the other person inward. It's the beginning of true emotional autonomy. Applied spirituality is precisely this, exchanging accusation for introspection, judgment for curiosity. And the most interesting thing is that when the individual changes internally, the external mirror responds. The same people who previously caused them suffering begin to move away, and others, more aligned, emerge naturally. It's as if the universe rearranges the cast of their story when the protagonist awakens. Jung would call this synchronicity, the phenomenon in which the external world reflects the inner state of the soul. And when human beings understand that the mirror doesn't lie, they stop trying to fix others and begin to polish themselves. It is at this moment that the question that changes everything arises. If the mirror reflects what I vibrate, why do I continue to attract what hurts me? Life doesn't deliver what we want. It delivers what we believe we deserve. This is one of the most uncomfortable truths of the unconscious. Carl Jung said that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. And that's exactly what happens with deserving. It's not rational, it's energetic. The ego can repeat positive mantras all day long, but if the shadow carries the belief that it's unlovable, the universe will respond to the deepest vibration, not the most beautiful affirmation. True spirituality isn't about attracting what you desire, but about healing what prevents you from feeling worthy of the best. From an early age, the unconscious learns through experience, especially through wounds. A child who is emotionally ignored develops the belief that they need to do something to be loved. A teenager who is constantly criticized learns that no matter how hard they try, it will never be enough. These impressions crystallize in the ego and shape the adult persona, which continues to try to prove its worth. At work, in relationships, in everything. This is why so many people attract partners who don't value them or bosses who belittle them. It's not bad luck, it's unconscious consistency. The soul repeats patterns until the individual awakens to what's really happening within. Those who understand this realize that shadow work is a sacred tool, not for manifesting things, but for dissolving beliefs. The person begins to observe their automatic reactions, their repetitive choices, their exhausting relationships, and little by little identifies the point where the belief of unworthiness has taken root. It is at this moment that healing begins. A powerful exercise is to write down 3 recent situations in which you felt devalued and ask, what within me believed I deserved this? The answer will rarely come from the ego. It springs from the unconscious, where the soul keeps the map of its own imprisonment. Jung called this individuation the process of reuniting the lost parts and rebuilding the center. Worthiness is, therefore, an internal mirror. The world reacts as a reflection of what a person believes about themselves. It's as if the universe says, I can only give you what you are capable of sustaining. Therefore, before attracting love, one must become someone who believes they are worthy of it. Before attracting prosperity, one must abandon the victim archetype, which sabotages one's own abundance. When an individual changes their internal vibration, external reality reorganizes itself. And it's not magic, it's deep psychology. The energy of worthiness is a matter of psychic frequency, not luck. And this frequency is adjusted every time a person honors their own worth. But this process isn't linear. There will be moments when everything seems to be going backward. Old relationships resurface, ego tests return. The past calls for a final test. It's the unconscious testing whether the new belief is solid. True spirituality doesn't promise a painless path. It teaches how to navigate pain consciously. When someone finally understands that they don't attract what they want, but what they believe they deserve, something breaks and rebuilds itself within. Life ceases to be a stage of repetition and becomes a field of conscious creation. And this is where the next challenge arises: understanding the role of the ego and the persona in this invisible cycle of self-sabotage. The ego is a talented actor, and the persona, the costume it dons to survive on the world stage. Carl Jung described both as necessary structures, but dangerous when they take over the psyche. The ego believes it is protecting, when in fact it is limiting. It creates narratives, fears, and excuses that prevent human beings from expanding. Self-sabotage arises from this unconscious pact. The ego fears losing control, and the persona fears rejection. Together, they prefer repeating painful patterns to facing the vulnerability of change. This is why, even wishing for the best, the individual always returns to the same place, because within them, there is a part that confuses comfort with security. Self-sabotage isn't a moral flaw, it's a psychic defense. It's the unconscious trying to avoid the same kind of pain that once wounded the soul. If someone has been humiliated for exposing themselves, the ego will learn to silence itself before speaking. If it has been abandoned by surrendering, it will create a cold and self-sufficient persona. Thus, every irrational behavior has its own emotional logic. Spirituality, in this context, is the process of observing these patterns with compassion, not judgment. It's looking at fear and saying, "I understand why you exist, but I no longer need you." This is true shadow work, illuminating what once operated in the shadows, transforming sabotage into consciousness. A simple example: how many times does someone start something enthusiastically, a project, a relationship, a life change, and without realizing it, find a reason to give up? It's the ego trying to protect familiar territory. It whispers phrases like, "It's not the time, maybe later, you're not ready." And the individual believes them, because these voices speak the language of reason. But this reason is a disguise of fear. The persona, in turn, feeds the illusion that if we appear strong and confident, we will be loved. But it is precisely this mask that prevents true love, because only those who show themselves whole can be loved completely. Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making darkness conscious. Overcoming self-sabotage requires courage and daily practice. It's not just positive thinking, but staring into your own psychic mirror. It's recognizing when your ego is steering the wheel and gently handing it back to yourself. A powerful exercise is to write down, before bed, the 3 actions you took during the day when you prevented yourself from moving forward, by procrastinating, criticizing yourself, or seeking approval. Then ask yourself, what fear was driving me at that moment? This simple act of observation breaks the automatism. Spirituality, when lived, is profoundly practical. It invites human beings to transform self-criticism into self-listening, resistance into curiosity, guilt into learning. When a person begins to observe themselves, something silently changes. The ego ceases to be an enemy and becomes a messenger. It reveals where there is still a fear of losing control. The persona, once a prison, becomes a tool of conscious expression. And it is at this point that self-sabotage dissolves, not through force, but through lucidity. The energy previously spent defending oneself is now used to create. The individual realizes they no longer need to choose between being loved and being authentic. And when this happens, a new portal opens, that of facing the shadow that sustained this entire invisible structure, the silent root of low self-esteem. The shadow is the basement of the soul, the place where the ego hides everything it fears to look at. Carl Jung stated that The shadow is what a person does not wish to be. Indeed, it is there that repressed feelings, forgotten pain, and denied impulses rest. When an individual rejects parts of themselves, they fragment their own light, and low self-esteem arises precisely from this split. The soul loses touch with its wholeness, and the human being begins to live half-heartedly. True spirituality is not about vibrating high, but about descending into the depths and embracing what has been left behind. The shadow is not the enemy, it is the wound that seeks to be understood. Low self-esteem in this sense is a spiritual symptom. It doesn't arise out of nowhere. It's the expression of a soul that feels unworthy of fully existing. The ego tries to compensate by seeking approval, success, or beauty. The persona tries to mask the pain with sympathy, performance, or apparent confidence. But deep down, there's a void that nothing fills. The individual becomes accustomed to living as if they were always almost enough. This feeling of inadequacy isn't weakness, it's the shadow asking to be recognized. Jung said that no one becomes enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Healing begins when a human being stops running from what they feel and begins to listen. Those who practice shadow work realize how much the shadow silently sustains the ego. Behind self-deprecation lies wounded pride. Behind guilt, a desire for control. Behind the fear of rejection, a yearning for absolute love. Everything the ego deems ugly, the soul knows is human. Spirituality at this point is not an escape from pain. It is a reconciliation with it. A simple exercise is to list the words that bother you most: weak, selfish, needy, difficult, and for each one, write a situation in which you acted that way. Then instead of condemning yourself, ask, what was I trying to protect? This question dissolves guilt and makes room for compassion. Low self-esteem also feeds on forgetfulness. The individual forgets what they've achieved, forgets their courage, forgets their essence. The ego makes them focus on their flaws, and the shadow ignored grows between the lines. The antidote lies in presence. Valuing yourself is a spiritual act because it requires looking at yourself unfiltered, with honesty and tenderness. It's recognizing, I'm not perfect, but I'm whole. When a person integrates their shadow, what was once shame becomes strength. Vulnerability transforms into authenticity, and what was once insecurity becomes magnetism. It's as if the soul finally heard says, now you can walk in peace, because nothing needs to be hidden anymore. But shadow integration isn't the end of the journey, it's the beginning of the return, because when the individual heals the wound to self-esteem, the unconscious begins to reveal another layer. Unhealed deficiencies, those that continue to project onto relationships what hasn't yet been resolved within. The shadow that once screamed, "You're not enough," now whispers, "You still need someone to prove it to you." And it's at this point that the mirror moves again. The unconscious begins to project, no longer to hurt, but to heal. And it's precisely here that we enter the next portal, how the unconscious projects unhealed deficiencies. The unconscious is a silent artist. It paints on the canvas of reality everything the ego tries to hide. Carl Jung explained that projections are the mechanisms by which we transfer outward what we cannot yet see within. When an individual carries unhealed needs, affective, emotional, or spiritual, they attract people and situations that portray these same wounds. Life, in its symbolic wisdom, uses others as therapeutic mirrors. The problem is that the ego, blinded by pride, interprets the reflection as an offense. True spirituality begins when a person realizes that what most irritates or hurts them in others is almost always a part of themselves crying out for attention. These projections are subtle but powerful. A woman who feels invisible might fall in love with someone emotionally unavailable. A man who fears abandonment might attract people who leave him. Someone who doesn't believe they deserve love engages in unbalanced relationships as an unconscious way of confirming their belief. It's cruel, but it's coherent. The unconscious seeks coherence, not comfort. It wants to heal, even if it hurts. Jung called this the process of individuation. The soul moves toward wholeness, and to do so, it must confront what is still divided. Every projected lack is an attempt by the unconscious to reunite the lost parts. When someone understands this, the game changes. The focus shifts from "why did the other person do this to me?" to "why did I need to experience this to learn something?" This shift in perspective is revolutionary. Spirituality ceases to be passive and becomes participatory. The individual begins to see each relationship as a psychic mirror, a laboratory of the soul. The practice is to observe intense emotions: jealousy, anger, guilt, fear, dependence. Instead of reacting, ask yourself, what is this emotion trying to show me? This question is a portal, because instead of running away from pain, human beings begin to use it as a compass. And this is the essence of shadow work, transforming triggers into guides. There's also an archetypal aspect to this dynamic. The unconscious, by projecting deficiencies, activates universal symbols: the savior, the persecutor, the victim, the abandoned, the rejected. These archetypes live within each of us, competing for space on the internal stage. When one of them dominates, the individual loses freedom and repeats the same storyline with different faces. How many times has someone asked, "Why do I always attract the same type of person?" And the answer is, because the lesson hasn't been integrated yet. Each new relationship is the same archetype with a new mask. Only when human beings appropriate their own script does destiny change its genre. It ceases to be drama and becomes awakening. But this process requires a rare kind of courage, the courage to be alone. Because when the unconscious stops projecting, it invites the individual to return home. Loneliness ceases to be absence and becomes encounter. It is in this silence that deficiencies lose strength and self-love matures. Jung said that he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakens. And when the gaze finally turns inward, the human being realizes that nothing they sought was truly outside. That emptiness that made them beg for love was merely a call to discover the original source. And it is precisely this journey, from lack to completeness, that manifests in the next stage: solitude as a portal to self-worth. Solitude is sacred territory. Although the ego fears it as punishment, the soul recognizes it as initiation. Carl Jung said that one must learn to bear one's own company if one truly wants to know oneself. Solitude is not the opposite of love, but its invisible foundation. It is in solitude that the human being strips away the persona, faces the echo of their own thoughts, and discovers the sound of their own essence. What many call isolation is, in fact, the process of returning to the self, the spiritual center that remains when all social roles fall away. This is why so many people fear being alone, because in silence, there is no longer anywhere to hide from oneself. For a long time, the ego made loneliness its enemy. It associated it with rejection, absence, and lack. But spirituality teaches that it is the opposite of this. It is presence, it is plenitude, it is the space where human beings reconnect with what they have always been. When someone allows themselves to be alone, something profound happens. The noise of the world fades, and inner voices begin to reveal themselves. First, discomfort comes, then clarity. It is in this stillness that the soul reveals its oldest truths. Solitude is the most honest mirror there is. It reflects what still needs to be healed, what needs to be let go of, and what needs to be loved again. Solitude is also the cradle of self-worth. When an individual stops seeking in others what they deny themselves, they begin to nourish themselves from within. It's a gradual, almost alchemical process. At first, there's resistance, the desire to send messages, fill voids, distract themselves with noise. But as the silence deepens, a new form of energy emerges, a serenity that doesn't depend on anyone. The person begins to realize that being alone isn't empty, it's whole. And paradoxically, it's in this state of wholeness that they become more magnetic. Because those who are self-sufficient don't beg, and those who don't beg attract what vibrates in reciprocity. Practicing this presence with oneself is the beginning of true, practical spirituality. It can be a simple ritual, turning off your cell phone for an hour and just breathing, writing down what you feel without censorship, walking in silence, observing your own body. These are small but deeply symbolic gestures. They tell the unconscious, I don't need to run away from myself. And when the unconscious feels it can relax in its own company, something shifts energetically. Choices become more conscious, relationships more selective, and self-love more natural. Human beings begin to value time, space, and energy as expressions of the sacred. This is how solitude ceases to be punishment and becomes ritual. Ultimately, solitude is the portal through which the self returns. It is the moment when the individual remembers that nothing is missing, that everything they sought in another was, in fact, a reflection of something dormant within. When someone reaches this point, silence no longer frightens, it welcomes. And this inner presence creates an unmistakable vibration, the energy of someone who truly values themselves. It is a peace that cannot be explained, only felt. Jung would say that this is the point at which the unconscious and consciousness join hands. And it is precisely there that the cycle closes, not as an end, but as a return to the origin, the love that begins and ends within oneself. Everything you accept tells the world how much you believe you are worth. And maybe now is the time to stop and ask yourself, what have I allowed to diminish who I am? How many times have you silenced yourself just to keep someone close? How many times have you shrunk yourself to fit into a place that was never yours? The truth is, the universe doesn't understand words. It understands vibration. And every time you choose less, life understands that it can offer you less. Carl Jung said that the noblest journey is to become who you are. And it starts the very moment you decide to stop trading yourself. Spirituality, in the end, is the return to one's own center, to the point where the ego falls silent, the persona falls away, and the self finally breathes. Don't wait for others to see your worth. Show it by standing on it. Stop trying to convince those who will never understand, and start taking care of the only territory that truly belongs to you, your energy. Now, look inside. What in you still accepts crumbs when the soul asks for a banquet? What in you still believes you need to prove to be worthy? Change begins when you understand that the love you seek is actually the love you need to give back to yourself. And when that happens, life shifts in frequency, and anything that doesn't match that new vibration simply disappears. So, if something in this video touched you, don't let that awareness die in comfort. Apply, test, live. Be the mirror of the value you would like to see in the world. And if you want to continue this journey with me, to deepen, heal, and awaken, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and keep walking. Because the next step isn't understanding your worth, it's finally starting to live it.